There's nothing crazy going on. We're 2 weeks out from the Rumble, and this is the time where they're setting things up. So I'm excited to dive into that. But I did want to mention, first things first, if you want to get involved today, you easily can. Go to luinfo.com, click on Watch Live. We're up on the YouTubes. The chat is open and ready to go as well. So if you'd like to get involved, you have questions, comments, concerns, we would love to hear them. Again, luinfo.com. But JC, you had mentioned that we are doing a live Royal Rumble watch party. Give us a little bit more information and details on that.
Yeah, well, January 31st, Road to WrestleMania, Royal Rumble. Little different this year as we are in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. So that means the start time is 1 p.m. Now, I personally like these afternoon shows. Don't you guys?
Yeah, I love it.
It's fun. It's if you're going to go 3 to 4 hours. So we're going to be live. Fans can tune in to the YouTube page on the Lou Info station. You can watch along, get our commentary, get Brody's next level insights to it in what should be a wild and rowdy and very interesting Royal Rumble. We'd love to watch with you. It's like you're in the room with Tony and Ryan. It's going to be a blast.
It's going to be so much fun. And I think one of my favorite things about the Royal Rumble is the fact that it's always the who's next. It's the countdown. It's the anticipation. And what better way to watch the Royal Rumble? Listen, it's super easy. Yeah. We're not going to be invading anything.
No.
All you got to do is you have the Rumble up on your TV. You got your laptop or your iPad next to you. And we're just talking. We're shooting the ish.
Instead of hearing commentary, well, we won't have the commentary on, obviously, but if you want to hear commentary from us, great opportunity.
Yeah,
we want to hear from you and your predictions. Powerhouse Hobbs, Chris Jericho, who knows? Conor McGregor. I don't know. This is going to be one of the wildest Rumbles yet.
I can't wait, and I'm always excited about the Rumble, and it seems to be, for me at least, not the kickoff of WrestleMania season, which I know it is, but for me, it's almost like, okay, now I can get back into wrestling.
Right.
There's that lull between Survivor Series and Rumble where it's kind of like, we know that there's going to be major events, but nothing like
John Cena helped that lull this year.
He did. This year's a different story, especially with John Cena. But one of the things I wanted to talk about before we get into WWE, before we get into AEW, we're going to recap all of that. But so TNA is on AMC now.
Yes, they are.
And it's interesting to me. So, Brody, before we really dive into TNA being on AMC, give me, let's say I have no idea what TNA is.
What is. I think I know what TNA is, but is this a wrestling league?
Okay, so TNA, it's Total Nonstop Action Wrestling. They started in 2002 by the Jarrett family. They had ran Memphis for many, many years. The Memphis territory, as it was commonly known as, the longest running territory in all of wrestling, really in modern day wrestling, one of the longer running territories. Jarrett and Jeff Jarrett founded it. And then, of course, Panda Energy and Dixie Carter became involved in 2003. And then Dixie really became a major, prominent figure on TNA, both behind the scenes and on television. She became the president of the company, and they made a lot of bad decisions. They hired Vince Russo, which lost them the deal on Spike. And when TNA was on Spike, they really had something going for a period of time. They had Sting, they had Kurt Angle, they had Hulk Hogan, they had Ric Flair, but obviously due to Dixie's poor hirings, and then Billy Corgan got into the mix, and oh my gosh, and then all the lawsuits, and oh my gosh. And then it was really on its last legs because in 2017, Anthem, a media company based out of Canada, Ed Nordholm bought the company. And now they weren't getting any momentum, any traction. Scott D'Amore was ahead of their creative. Listen, Scott D'Amore is great, and he's great and everything, but they made a pivot, and they made a pivot to become more of a developmental for WWE. They partnered with WWE. They changed leadership. Now Carlos Silva's in charge. They have Hunter Johnston, who's a native St. Louis and who is known as Delirious. He was the head booker of Ring of Honor. He is now charged of TNA's creative, and now they're the new OVW, as our friend Conrad Thompson has said. They're the new Ohio Valley Wrestling. They've become a developmental for WWE. A lot of their, talent, they're basically being used as a pipeline. They've cut a lot of their guys. Now, some of them are landing, on their feet excellently in AEW. Jake something, who is now known as Jake Doyle, is one of those examples, but they've cut a lot of their wrestlers. They've retooled the roster now. They're going on AMC, which is their new television deal. And really, I think that they're kind of becoming, if they're not a veteran of WWE or a veteran roster like a Dolph Ziggler or a Kurt Hawkins or a Frankie Kazarian of the past, and if they're not a wrestler that WWE is interested in, you unfortunately don't really have a place in TNA. So they've really retooled and reshaped the roster, and they had their first episode on AMC on January 15th. They were in Garland, Texas at the Curtis Colwell Center, and there were a few title changes on the show. A lot happened on their first show on AMC, and I really think that this is good for TNA to become more of a developmental for WWE, and OVW really sending their talent up. You've seen with Jordan Grace and Joe Hendry, and now you're seeing it with Leon Slater on SmackDown. They are elevating talent up to the WWE roster, and I think this is a good thing for TNA, and I like the pivot that the company has taken and not trying to be a competitor of WWE, but instead being an alliance with WWE in this modern wrestling landscape.
I agree with you. Now, if I can take just a couple steps back.
Yes.
Is TNA, the only reason TNA exists today is because Jeff Jarrett got fired on live television?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Because I know that's like the legend is that, McMahon bought WCW, fired Jeff Jarrett on the spot on live TV. He was done. And then all of a sudden you hear TNA come to fruition a year later, 2 years later.
Right.
So it started out of spite. If you really want to break it down.
Of course.
And to be around, think about that. That was what, 99, 98?
No, 2002, the year I was born.
Okay.
In that, yeah.
02, and still today, TNA is around. Regardless of their status and where they sit in the hierarchy of wrestling right now, that's impressive.
This company will not die. This has 9 lives. And if you recall, I remember those first early days, it was a weekly pay-per-view
in Nashville.
of what, about $10?
It was $10.
Yeah, you could watch the shows. I tuned in when Jeff Jarrett went down there, and for a while, TNA was the alternative. It has gone through so many different iterations. For a while, it was Impact Wrestling. And to your point, when Dixie Carter gets involved, when Kurt Angle came, there were some bangers with Samoa Joe. Brody, was that the peak of TNA?
Yeah, I would say the peak of TNA was the Cornette years of 2006 and 2000 through 2009, when you had Cornette, when you had Dutch Mantell.
Bruce Pritchard was down there.
No, Bruce Pritchard came in 2010. That was the start of the downturn. But I would say, that was the start of the downturn. But I would say TNA's peak years from 2006 to 2009, Cornette, Russo, Dutch Mantell was there.
Right.
You had Road Dogg, Savio Vega's agents. You had Jeremy Borash, who's excellent, by the way. I've always been a big fan of this guy. Jeremy Borash, I call him the unsung hero of wrestling. For those who don't know, he actually works in WWE now and does a great deal with WWE's Lucha promotion, AAA.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
For a while, it was the alternative, and it felt like they had the heat when the dark days, when there was no competition from, WWE was ruled the scene, some bad creative going on. You could watch the X Division. What are some of the stars over the years that really made themselves into
I would say AJ Styles is probably the biggest one. The biggest. Look what he's done in WWE. AJ Styles, Samoa Joe, Bobby Roode. James Storm should have been a bigger star. He was one of those.
He got in his own way.
He got in his own way. I would say
Beer Money. That was
that was great. Jay Lethal was there early on. Xavier Woods was there early on. Ron Killings, R-Truth established himself.
I forgot about that.
Right. And
there were a lot of guys.
To your point, everyone sort of looks at the jump the shark moment is they tried the Wednesday Night Wars. They brought
Monday Night Wars. You mean?
Was it Monday?
Yeah, it was Monday night. Let me tell you the story there. January 4th, 2010. And I remember this. I was in the first grade, and I was very upset because I had to now flip the channels between WWE and TNA because I was watching both of them at that point in time.
Yeah, that was
the closest you had to the Monday Night Wars.
I was frustrated. I was like, I gotta flip the television. Oh my God, that's Ric Flair. Wait, that's Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart. Wait, I gotta go back and talk. It's one of those things where I'm like, oh my God. It was so many stars. It ultimately turned out to be a big mistake.
Now, it really was.
Now, let me ask you this question. Okay. You had mentioned, Kurt Angle had some time in TNA. I think that I would agree with anybody who would say that bearded, bald Kurt Angle in TNA was some of the best Kurt Angle work that he ever had. Vicious. I mean, I continuously see on any type of, shocking moments in wrestling, all-time crazy moments in wrestling, all these YouTube clips, Kurt Angle doing the moonsault off the top of the cage in TNA is one of the most insane spots because what people forget is that Kurt Angle wasn't 28 when he was doing this. No. Kurt Angle was near the tail end of his career while he was doing absolutely incredible things in TNA. And it was incredible to watch.
Yeah. Well, it was interesting to watch. I did watch the AMC premiere, and very interesting how they balanced the legacy. They had video roll packages showing Sting, showing some of these names that have come up from there.
Yeah.
But now you have a new generation, and it was an interesting world. There's a lot of mixed feelings on it. The AMC show, it's just a lot of castaways and new people, but there are some bright spots, and it seems like Mike Santana is one of them.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit more about where TNA, you did a brilliant job. They're sort of the OVW of it all. Who are some of the folks in TNA right now that you see as the next generation of stars?
I think there are a few names that stand out in my mind. Obviously, Mike Santana is one of them. I would say Moose. They've kept Moose around all these years. He's been a mainstay in TNA, and maybe he gets a shot in WWE. I've mentioned Leon Slater, I think, is one of those guys that they've really had down there. I mean, but a lot of the roster, I mean, they've had significant roster issues. Maybe I have to reiterate this. Mance Warner is now there, but most of they're bringing a lot of veterans down there. Their roster now, AJ Francis, who was previously in WWE.
The Hardys are down there. They're sort of a staple.
Elijah's down there.
Yes.
Basically, Elias in WWE. Eric Young is down there, a veteran. Frankie Kazarian, who he took the title away from. Mike Santana's down there. Eddie Edwards, who's part of the Wolves. Met the Hardys, Moose.
Fandango.
Which by the way,
Ali is down there. Dolph Ziggler's down there.
Which, by the way,
is down there.
Fandango, and I believe they did they
Macklin's down there.
Am I wrong? Did they just sign? I don't know what he's going by now, but did they just sign Damian Sandow too?
I don't know if I read that. Yeah, but
I thought I saw
he
that.
was there for a while. It just seems like this weird. Sarah was asking me the hierarchy of all these. I mean, it's sort of a fourth. I think trying to be number 2 to WWE is a fool's errand.
Yeah.
I think they're in such a great place. To your point, Brody, that you would sum up their last year as if you can't beat them, join them. And I think it's done wonders, and that's why I think they got the AMC
all these guys just joined AEW. They have released Trey Miguel, Zachary Wentz, Myron Reed, and Desmond Xavier, and Jake something, and then now they're in AEW.
Yeah,
who are the Rascals? I've seen this now.
Yeah, the Rascals. They were all in TNA, and then I don't want to bury these guys, but I don't think WWE saw much in them.
Really?
I not a chance. And they're just like, well.
How would you describe them? Are they DX? What are they?
They were just guys in the X division that TNA would have. That always that X division back in the. Remember, it was Christopher Daniels, and it was all like Jay Lethal and
some incredible
all
highlights.
The X division guys that they kind of had. I think they're just not going to end up being much in WWE. And I think TNA's there are two types of wrestlers that you're going to see in TNA. Guys that WWE wants on the main roster in a couple of years, and veterans that they're going to bring down there to just mentor the young guys and helping them up. And that's how it was in OVW. And I think that's better for everybody. And I know everyone's like, oh my God, well, they're not going to build any stars. And no, they are building stars. Yeah. They're just not going to be built. That's not their
It's not built in a day. Yeah,
that's
it's not built in a day.
You signed a deal with the devil. If anyone gets over on here, they probably got a year on them. Joe Hendry, and I'm sure they'll come for Santana at some point. It was fun to see Santino Morello down there. Listen, I know that's your boy from Jim Cornette. I think Sonya Deville, whatever.
Yeah, she debuted. Yeah. They also brought Cora Jade, who's now known as Elena Black, is now down
you're
there.
helping me decipher.
Oh, wait,
some
she's there. So I didn't see that.
Alternative dimension.
Yeah, it's pretty
Canadian
awesome.
dimension.
Now, I guess you can say
down there.
I guess you can say, looking at it, you would consider probably TNA to be AA if you want to talk about in baseball terms.
So this is what Paul Levesque always had a vision for a minor league system where single A is WWE ID, and shout out to Laney Luck, who's a part of Glory Wrestling, is now the women's ID champion on the women's side for WWE.
Oh, really?
That's the single A version, and really are a lot of the independent promotions around the country. And then AA is TNA, NXT is AAA, and then Major Leagues is the main roster.
Okay. Another X Division TNA will be known for the 6-sided ring, the Kurt Angle run, the Samoa Joe. We can't talk about TNA without mentioning the Knockouts. They were on fire. You look at Awesome Kong. You look at Gail Kim. Women's wrestling and taking it seriously was sort of rebirthed in TNA.
Yeah.
I mean, tell me I'm wrong.
Yeah. No, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, I even look at, somebody like who lives here in the St. Louis area now, Angelina Love.
Yeah, she was part of it.
She really got her start, really was instrumental in taking that women's division, the Knockouts division, because I think what TNA did with their women's division, while WWE was going, put them in bras, put them in panties, TNA was going, we can highlight their beauty, but let's also let them wrestle.
She was in the Beautiful People. Remember, she was in it with Velvet Sky.
Bully Ray did his best work there, and I don't understand why that never came up to WWE.
Actually, I'll have a point on that. It was pitched. Vince McMahon knew about Bully Ray, and we've never heard the full story about it, but it was going to be Bubba Ray the Intimidator, and that was going to be a character in WWE, and it never went to fruition.
He was on fire. He had it. That may be the legacy, is the missed opportunities of things that caught on that never translated.
Let me tell you this, okay? This is one of the funniest stories that I know about TNA, and I love this story so much, is when they were doing the Aces and 8.
Right.
Okay. And they were doing it. It was kind of like a motorcycle gang that was just
Pizza
causing
Hero.
havoc. The story had a great buildup and then immediately fell apart,
Of
like
course.
very quickly.
Right.
But one of my favorite things about it is they needed masked guys to get in the ring, and they needed people that knew how to work.
Yes.
So backstage, they decided to ask some of the guys to get into the ring. And D'Lo Brown was one of those guys.
Yes.
He was never supposed to wrestle. He was never supposed to be in it. He was a backstage talent. And he got into the ring, and within the first 5 seconds, the crowd started chanting D'Lo Brown because his movements, the way he looked,
Everything.
the way he said, and I quote, he goes, "I would have got away, looks too familiar."
That's
so
hilarious.
the back of his head. So all of a sudden, they had to change the script and write into the storyline that D'Lo Brown was a member of Aces and Eights.
Brody,
But
I
I
wanna
thought was
ask you
great.
something.
That's
I think he's still an
fantastic.
agent down in TNA or WWE, still working in the company. But yes, that was.
I
and
just
he's
love
right.
it.
He was
Like-
there from March of 2013 to July of 2013. He
You
was-
mentioned Bobby Roode, and
Yeah.
to me,
Oh.
it felt like there was a moment. I think it was a Bound for Glory that Hulk Hogan might have been reffing, but it was Sting. No, Roode was supposed to win the title, and they didn't put him on him, and it felt like this missed moment that TNA.
I think they were figuring
did
out who the
not.
guy was. Everybody knows the guy should have been Bobby Roode. Is it James Storm? Is
yeah.
it Bobby Roode? Do
but
we
it
know who
felt
it
like
really
a
is?
missed thing. He wasn't ready. It just felt like TNA had a moment to break out, and at every
Yeah.
moment they chose
They-
the wrong
they-
That's
path.
it.
What he's
That's it.
referring to is when
Yes.
Kurt Angle won the title at Hardcore Justice, and then on Impact, James Storm beat Kurt Angle, and then the next week, Bobby Roode beat James Storm. It's like, we
Yeah.
made a mistake. It's
What's
just completely-
happening?
Yeah, completely.
That
But
is,
there was
that is
another
the
one too,
perfect.
yeah.
That is the perfect way to, I think, summarize at least the old TNA.
Correct.
Was they always got right there and
Right.
then dropped the
Well,
ball
that's been
Right.
true
when
since
it when it
Pulses.
counted. When it
Well,
counted.
listen,
but
yeah.
let's talk about the AMC show because
Yeah,
it has
Yeah.
been very polarizing.
right.
I tuned in. I didn't watch the whole show, full disclosure. And I tuned in probably at a time that really didn't do the full show justice. It was when they were introducing Mr. Elegance.
Who is that?
I don't know who that is. I
Is
don't
it
know
someone
why
else?
I don't know why
looked
I'm
familiar.
supposed to care.
Right.
It almost looked like Timu Dragunov.
I
Like
thought
that-
so too.
That's kind of what it looked like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just, again, I'm sorry, and maybe it's my fault because I'm not up to date on the storylines of TNA.
Mhm.
But if you are going to come out on AMC and you're going to offer this product to the public for the very first time, you have to create a show that is going to get somebody like me who is familiar with wrestling but not necessarily up to date on TNA, and you got to give me a reason to come back. Unfortunately, I'm just going to say it. I don't think they did.
Are you
yeah.
not a fan? Are you just not a fan of developmental concept, or do you
No,
think that's a good concept?
I think it's a fantastic concept. And to be honest with you, some of the names that are there, like I really enjoy watching the actual product. But again, for you to network, you are supposed to be putting your best foot forward, correct?
Yeah.
You would assume on the debut episode, you put your absolute best foot forward. And I don't necessarily know if they accomplished that.
Well, I would argue they thought they were in every turn, and you're sitting backstage and you say, we need the biggest, broadest audience. Let's bring in a Perez Hilton. Let's bring in AJ
That
Styles
was
to
wild.
listen, say whatever. I think they were trying to me to bring in as many known names and while integrating new ones as much as they could. But there's some visa issues too. But the weird thing everybody's talking about, there is a pay-per-view tonight called Genesis. Sega does what Nintendo don't, right? It is
yeah.
tonight. And evidently it is a whole Texas death match that wasn't announced. And Dolph Ziggler, formerly known as Dolph Ziggler,
Oh,
is the
no.
referee. So it just feels a little duct taped together, and maybe they're trying, but you know what? This is the little promotion that could.
Yeah, it's the rematch. It's going to be Mike Santana versus Frankie Kazarian and Nick Nemeth. Dolph Ziggler will be the referee. JDC, who is Fandango, it's his retirement match tonight. He's going to take on Eddie Edwards. You got Channing. Stax Lorenzo versus Eric Young versus BDE versus a surprise four-way match for the international title. You got Lee Ying Lee versus Zarya. That's from NXT. Zarya, who is tagged with Sol Ruka in NXT for the TNA
Right.
Knockouts World Championship. You've got the TNA World Tag Team Championship. The Hardys, Jeff and Matt, going up against the Righteous, Vincent and Dutch. Elijah, who is known as Elias in WWE versus Mustafa Ali, who's also in WWE. AJ Francis versus Rich Swann. Both those guys were previously in WWE. Cedric Alexander versus Moose versus Joe Hendry, actually, on the show. So it'll be a three-way. Cedric Alexander previously WWE, and then Ryan Nemeth versus Mara Sabe.
Well, this is the most people have been talking about
Saying,
TNA.
I'm
I think
sorry.
they're making the right
Forever.
moves. So, yeah, shout out to that.
Hardys
There's so
drop
much
the tag
wrestling.
titles on the first episode.
It doesn't
on
matter.
AMC.
It just
doesn't.
doesn't.
No,
Nothing
that's,
matters.
see, that's what Tony's saying. Like, well, it just
Right.
doesn't matter. It's
No,
just nothing.
it's fine.
Here's
I
my
think-
question. I have a question before we go to the break. And I know we've got, Raw and
Yes,
SmackDown and
yes.
AEW and a bunch of other stuff to cover here. But my question is this. So do you see these veterans that are WWE famous, i.e.
Yeah.
the Hardys, things like that?
Right.
Do you see them eventually getting at least one more shot in WWE? Or do you think
Never
this
say
is
never.
over?
No,
Drew
never say
McIntyre.
never.
Drew McIntyre went
Never
to
say
TNA,
never.
Different,
reinvented
different,
himself.
different though.
Different
Drew
era,
McIntyre was
different
younger.
era, but
I
think,
understand.
yes, I do think that they'll get a chance to go back to WWE and close out their careers. I really wish Kazarian would have gotten his WWE opportunity a little sooner. It probably will happen for him. It'll just
Be
maybe be a little
backstage.
later. Yeah, like it'll be more like he'll maybe have a little run and then,
then like a
more have
trainer.
backstage
Right.
role. Yeah, no, I agree. I think they'll get maybe a little run at the end of their WWE careers, but I think this is more they have their last in-ring years left, and then they're trying to transition them like Dolph Ziggler into producers or backstage.
But they can
personnel, like
reinvent
you've said.
themselves, and any
easily.
platform that's good for
Absolutely,
wrestlers to be
absolutely,
creative on TV is a
absolutely.
good thing. And anywhere they get
Absolutely.
paid, I have no idea the financials of this company, but my goodness, I can't imagine they're
Yep.
making too much money right
You know
now.
what?
But they've been
Viacom
doing
helped
good.
Dixie Carter pay for all of their stars,
Right,
so I'm sure
Sting and
WWE is
everything.
helping.
Yeah,
see
Sting
some of
absolutely.
their
had
talent.
14 retirement matches there.
Right.
Well, we'll have to see if we see any TNA names hitting the Royal Rumble when we get back from the break here. We've got your Raw recap. We'll talk SmackDown. We'll talk AEW. And of course, we'll talk about some rumors and things we're hearing as we lead into the Royal Rumble. This is Wrestling on the Spectrum on the Lou Information Station, online and on demand 24/7 at louinfo.com.